The unification of cloud control planes is becoming an increasingly important part of efficient IT environment administration. On-Premises Nutanix Central simplifies these operations by providing a unified console to manage all your Nutanix infrastructure. Hi, I'm Chris from the Nutanix Technical Marketing Engineering team. In part 1 of this series, we looked at preparing for a deployment of On-Premises Nutanix Central. Then, in part 2, we completed the deployment based on those preparations. This video is part 3 in the series, and now that On-Premises Nutanix Central is deployed, covers post-deployment configuration. Let's get started. To configure Nutanix Central and register Prism Central for use in the global view, a number of steps are required. To begin, the prerequisites for the install must be met. These steps will be briefly covered in an upcoming section of this video and are clearly documented on my.nutanix.com. Next, an identity provider must be configured for On-Premises Nutanix Central. The identity provider, or IDP, ensures the correct directory service is used when specifying user accounts and groups with access to both Nutanix Central and Prism Central. In this demo, we'll be using Microsoft Active Directory as our directory service. As part of the IDP configuration step, Nutanix Identity and Access Management, or IAM, will be used to add authorization policies, or ACPs. ACPs specify which users and groups have permission to log in to Nutanix Central and query Prism Central for alerts and configuration details. While this video will make use of elevated privileges and Active Directory administrator accounts, best practice typically suggests an approach of least privilege where accounts have only the required permissions. Detailed per account Active Directory configuration is beyond the scope of this video. With Nutanix IAM and the IDP configured, the Prism Central unique identifier can be obtained. The PC unique ID is used during the upcoming Prism Central registration step and must be noted down for future use. Prism Central can then be registered with Nutanix Central. This step makes use of the Prism Central unique identifier noted down in the previous step and includes the generation of a downloadable API key that will be used during the final registration step. With the API key generated, the final step of the registration process can be completed within Prism Central. This final step makes use of the API key downloaded previously and carries out a number of important tasks. It verifies the API key, establishes the identity federation using Nutanix IAM, and creates the secure tunnel between Nutanix Central and Prism Central. Before looking at the detailed prerequisites, let's take a quick look at the On-Premises Nutanix Central architecture. As shown here, full communications between Nutanix Central and the registered Prism Central instances is carried out over secure HTTP port 443. Plain text and unauthenticated requests are explicitly disallowed by all endpoints, and it is important to note all requests are outgoing from and initiated by Prism Central and not from Nutanix Central. Before deploying On-Premises Nutanix Central, a number of prerequisites must be met. The main prerequisites are highlighted here and are also documented on my.nutanix.com. It is recommended to always check my.nutanix.com for the latest information. To summarize, On-Premises Nutanix Central requires Prism Central 7.3 or later, and all registered Prism Central instances must be PC version 2024.3 or later. Network, port, and licensing requirements must be met. The Nutanix Marketplace must be enabled with Marketplace Bundle 4.2.1 or later. An identity provider such as Microsoft Active Directory must exist before deployment, and a supported browser must be used. With these prerequisites noted, let's begin the deployment demo. The configuration of an identity provider, or IDP, in both Nutanix Central and Prism Central allows administrators to configure which directory service will be used as the basis for upcoming permission settings. Shown here, a connection to an on-premises Microsoft Active Directory is being configured, requiring the specification of the AD domain name, LDAP directory URL, and, in this demo, the credentials used for Active Directory connection. Throughout this process, Note the on-screen callouts that indicate which configurations are identical in Nutanix Central and Prism Central. The next step is critical and involves the configuration of Nutanix Identity and Access Management Authorization Policies, or ACP. These policies specify which users and/or groups have specific permissions within Nutanix Central, including those with permission to query Prism Central for alerts and configuration. This demo shows a single ACP being added in the Nutanix Central console, a process that will be replicated in the Prism Central console. The ACP configuration process is the same on each side unless noted otherwise. The Prism Central unique identifier is required before the Nutanix Central registration process can begin. Log in to Prism Central, make sure you are viewing the infrastructure app, then open Prism Central settings. Within Prism Central Management, the specific Prism Central instance's unique identifier can be obtained and recorded by clicking the copy button next to ID as shown here. With the Prism Central unique identifier recorded, the On-Premises Nutanix Central registration process can begin. We start by logging into the Nutanix Central console and, because this demo is a new deployment, are prompted to register our first domain. The unique identifier is entered here, along with the Prism Central domain's location. Note, the location is used when generating the global view map coming later in this video. Lastly, a meaningful display name is entered, allowing us to easily identify this registration amongst others within Nutanix Central. After saving, we can download and securely store the generated API key required for upcoming steps. Now that the IDP and ACP configurations are complete in both Nutanix Central and Prism Central, the domain registration process can be completed in Prism Central. Here, we navigate to the Admin Center app, open Settings, and use the Register to Nutanix Central link. This demo recorded the Prism Central unique identifier and generated the API key in previous steps, so they are being skipped here. Uploading the API key carries out a key verification process and creates the secure tunnel between Nutanix Central and Prism Central, also verifying that this instance has permission to complete the registration. This process will stop and prompt if errors in the configuration were encountered, for example if the uploaded API key or Prism Central unique identifier don't match the expected values. This completes all required steps in the Nutanix Central configuration and Prism Central registration process. The last step in this demo shows the administrator logging into the Nutanix Central console and verifying the domain registration was successful by checking the global view map as mentioned earlier. Prior to the recording of this demo segment, two distinct Prism Central instances were registered, demonstrating the use of the Prism Central domain location value. We can also see the centralized view of both registered Prism Central domains, including alerts and configuration. This quickly and efficiently allows visibility of all registered global Nutanix infrastructure. This video in the On-Premises Nutanix Central series has covered a high-level introduction to configuring a new Prism Central domain registration in an existing deployment of On-Premises Nutanix Central, and looked at the global view when multiple Prism Central instances have been registered. If you would like more information, or if you would like to try Nutanix Central for yourself, head over to nutanix.com/products/Nutanix Central. Thanks for watching.